Is it? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, in ASEAN and beyond, I hope. Welcome to this conversation among friends, brought to you by the Regional Working Group for an ASEAN Human Rights Mechanism. We are a group of human rights advocates, volunteers from different countries in ASEAN who have worked together for the past 25 years to work with ASEAN in the establishment of a regional mechanism to handle human rights issues. In 2010, ASEAN established the AICHR, ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. But we continue to engage ASEAN and AICHR to ensure that human rights standards that our working group have worked on are met in the region. We just don't want to let go of it yet. Today, we will tackle the newest 5-year plan of AICHR that was recently approved by the senior officials in the 53rd AMM. It is the third 5-year plan since AICHR was established 10 years ago. In the interest of transparency and human rights, we have organized this conversation to introduce this latest 5-year plan to the ASEAN community as we look back to the promise of AICHR and look forward to the development of a truly effective human rights body that will work for the peoples of our region. We have 4 panelists today. 2 of them are present members of AICHR. They are Mr. Eric Paulson, representing Malaysia, and Ms. Yuyun Wayuningram from Indonesia.
Hello.
We also have 2 former members of AICHR. They are Mr. Rafendi Jamin. Rafendi, are you there? From Indonesia, who is back in NGO work at the Human Rights Working Group.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes,
Okay.
good. And Mr. Edmund Bon from Malaysia, who we have welcomed in our in the working group as a member of the Malaysian working group of the ASEAN for an ASEAN human rights mechanism. So, to start our session, Ms. Yuyun has consented to give us a brief perspective on the highlights of the AICHR work plan, which is a very complicated work plan. And I'm sure not very many people have read through it. So we hope that she will give us an idea of what it's like. Take it away, Yuyun.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Today is the anniversary of AICHR, 23rd of October. So today is the 11th year of the AICHR. Exactly this year, at exactly these hours, Rafendi walked to the stage and then announced as representative of Indonesia to the AICHR. So I have a video in my Facebook documenting the moment. So happy anniversary, AICHR. And before I start with the presentation, I would like to take this opportunity to thanks all the organizations that have sent inputs to develop this. There are noises to develop this 5-year work plan. I thank you very much. So I hope some of the inputs already included there. Can I have the PowerPoint presentation now, please? I've prepared the PowerPoint presentation. Some of them I copied ASEAN Secretariat's slides. And next slide, please. So in terms of process, there has been a number of processes before we arrive at this point. First, we started with the strategic planning in November 2019. In strategic planning, we come up with the vision, mission, and some of the objectives and key areas. So this is the first time that AICHR organized and agreed to come up with a strategic planning before we develop the work plan, and then after that we agreed on the priority focus areas and priority areas, and then we come up with a zero draft, and then followed by the discussion among the assistant of the AICHR. And when it come to AICHR in June, we only discuss around 6 to 7 issues unresolved. And by June, we already have the 5-year work plan to be reviewed by CPR, and then to be adopted by ASEAN foreign ministers. So we had the adoption by uh, uh, last September. Next, please. Many people have asked me how the 5-year work plan has been developed. So I just try to extract some of the principles and then steps that we went through so far. First, because we come to the AICHR not the first time, so there are a number of institutional memory about some ideas, follow up, recommendation, and also from the previous 5-year work plan, from the recommendation from the workshops, and also gathered inputs from different stakeholders. So we try to reflect all these ideas into the zero draft. That is why we call it as continuity. So it continued from the ideas from the previous AICHR representative, from the workshop, and many other factors into this. And also because in one of the joint communique of the foreign ministers 2015-2016, foreign ministers emphasize the importance of having a continuity aspect and programmatic approach. So we programmatic approach in a sense that we organize things, we conduct something not ad hoc ways, but rather following what has been left out from the previous activity. So it continue to evolve, to come up with something more tangible, rather than only having workshop and then finish after that. And then, as part of ASEAN body, we need to align ourselves with the ASEAN objective goals and the blueprint, especially on political security community. And we have to take care of these our mandates, because that's exactly why we are exist. So we include our mandate. So 5-year work plan is the implementation of the mandates, one way of implementing our mandates. And inclusivity. We try to bring the voices from sectoral bodies, from the existing work plan, like Bali work plan. Bali work plan focus on CVE, counter violent extremism, Bohol work plan on trafficking in person, ASEAN Declaration on culture of prevention, and many other documents that we have that related to human rights. And also hearing from inputs from civil society organization. At least for myself, I receive inputs from 9 organizations already, and already included in the draft. Next, please. So these are some of the documents we have. We look at the previous 5-year work plan and many other things. So I already mentioned it. So can we go to the next slide, please? This is the function of the AICHR. We categorize into standard setting, protection, policy support, dialogue, research, human rights strategies. And the illustration on the right side, it guide us on where we are in these mechanisms. As a regional mechanisms, our role is to complement uh, to the core of the system at the national level, and to be the intermediary with the international system. So that's how we look at it, and how the work plan has been developed. Next, please. This is a skeleton of the 5-year work plan, just to give you numbers and statistic about the activities outputs that we try to achieve by 2025. Next, please. So the work plan structured under vision, result areas, objective we are going to achieve. Objective is actually a reflection of the objective of the AICHR itself. This is the interpretation of how the AICHR implement or realize the 6 objectives assigned to us. And from that, we come up with of 6 focus areas, which actually a compilation of 14 mandates. So these 14 mandates, some of them are redundant, some of them are similar. So we put together into six focus areas. Next, please. I might not be going into detail into some of the activities, but basically this work plan, this 5-year plan, is driven by the ideas what kind of ICHR we would like to see by 2025. So in the area of promotion on the implementation of ASEAN instruments related to human rights, we aim to come up with the human rights framework based on ASEAN Declaration. We aim for effective implementation of the instruments by the treaty on the treaty obligations. We aim for implementation of ASEAN instrument on human rights, and look for joint cooperation on human rights among ASEAN sectoral bodies, among ASEAN member states, and in the cross pillars: social, cultural, economic, community, and political security. In the area of strategies for cooperation, we are actually guided by the joint communique from 2010 until 2019, especially on how to define human rights strategies. So these joint communiques actually give us some of ideas, such as mainstreaming of human rights, coming up with the realization of protection mandate, dialogue, regional framework, plan of action, policy recommendation are something that we can categorize as human rights strategies. So therefore, in our 5-year work plan, we include this kind of output or result that we would like to see happening or achieved by 2025. We also envision having a common approaches on position of human rights by 2025. We have, well, I think the work plan, the 5-year work plan, it did indicate some of the issues, but in the interest of the time, I did not put that into my presentation now. We also aim for having number of thematic studies, grievance mechanisms, mechanism that based on human rights based approach, as well as remedy and gender mainstreaming in AICHR. In the area of policy support for ASEAN member state and ASEAN sectoral bodies, we aim for more ratification of instruments of human rights, promote favorable condition for human rights to evolve, to develop in the region, especially for vulnerable groups. Dialogue on the ASEAN culture for prevention, culture of prevention for peaceful, inclusive, resilient, healthy, and harmonious society, as well as policy support and assistance for human rights on human rights to ASEAN sectoral bodies. So these are some of the ideas we would like to arrive at or to achieve by 2025. Next slide, please. In the area of engaging stakeholders, we would like to have a regular stakeholder dialogue. We wanted to have a synergy between the state and private sector to promote human rights, and we also see possibility by 2025 to achieve at a point in which cooperation at the national, regional, international level can be realized. In the area of capacity building and public awareness, by 2025, we would like to see that AICHR implement public awareness, encourage dialogue on human rights cooperation and remedies in ASEAN, and having strategy and plan of action in relation to human rights and peace. Capacity building, research, number of research will be done by 2025. Awareness among young people related to the role of AICHR, and rights-based monitoring and evaluation of capacity of the AMS, ASEAN member state, in delivering human rights obligation. In the area of strengthening the governance and institutional capacity, this is a new area in the 5-year work plan, which I did not find in the previous 5-year work plan. We aim for knowledge management system in AICHR to be realized by 2025. Having, of course, annual report to foreign ministers. This is very common, and perform any tasks by foreign ministers. Next slide, please. Um, I would like to highlight on the protection. I choose to see it from the perspective of evolution. So you can see in the left box, if 5-year work plan 2010-2015 include the visit, the country visit in the country. In the second 5-year work plan 2016 to 2020, still include the uh, study visit, also obtain copy of reports from the member state. But you can see on the 5-year work plan 2021-2025, we added more possible protection activities in the AICHR, taking the inspiration from the previous two 5-year work plan. We continue to include the country visit, but there is a the additional word here, country learning visit or something. And also there is a referral system included there by consensus of AICHR representative, a complaint mechanism, grievance mechanism, and recommendation on the implementation of ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, as well as ASEAN Human Rights Index. So instead of mentioning monitoring human rights, we use a human rights index. So you can see another illustration on the right side. So as of now, AICHR has agreed to come up with the complaint mechanism that we call it as three-step complaint mechanism. So all complaints, incoming complaints, will be recognized by ASEAN Secretariat, and then will be tabled in the AICHR meeting, and then the country, respected country or question in the country in question will be able to follow up the issue if they want. So this is the earlier stage that we can arrive at for the complaint mechanism, but this cannot be achieved without the work of the previous representatives. So having some work before, it's very important for us, because then we can bring all the work forward to continue what has been done by the previous representatives. Next slide, please. In terms of human rights strategies, we also have the evolution. We can see here from time to time, from the first 5-year work plan, second 5-year work plan, and the third 5-year work plan. I do not want to read this. I think we need to save some time, but please feel free to get access to this PowerPoint presentation. But I would like to emphasize that yes, AICHR is having evolution. If you look at from the first 5-year work plan, second 5-year work plan, and the third 5-year work plan, you can see the continuity as well as the evolution from the beginning until the end. But again, what we have included now in the 5-year work plan is because the previous representative and the previous 5-year work plan has had included number of ideas already. And next slide, please. This is on the issue. There is a difference between the first 5-year work plan. You didn't see any issue mentioned in the first 5-year work plan, and the second 5-year work plan, 2016 to 2020. The issue on the right of person with disabilities, CSR and human rights, and what else? Violence against women, right to education, mentioned there, and that create a lot of tangible output coming up from this 5-year work plan. So learning from this one, the current 5-year work plan include number of issues, helping that these issues will lead us into more tangible output by 2025. So again, this is one way for us to learn from the previous achievement uh, 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 done by the previous AICHR representatives. Next. Uh, in response to the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, AICHR also contributes a number of ideas coming up from our 5-year work plan. So while doing our 5-year work plan, we also contribute to the idea to the measures of recovering the region from COVID-19. So under broad strategy 2 on human security, we have included number of activities that need to be addressed early, like right to, inclusive education, public health, digital human right in digital age, mixed migration, and also addressing some of the issues faced by vulnerable groups such as women, children, person with disabilities, migrant workers, and so on. Under broad strategy 5, we have included the business and human rights issues, especially on training. So these are actually coming from our 5-year work plan with a little bit modification to to be in line with the purpose of the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. I think this is my last slide. One more. So yeah, people also ask how to move from 5-year work plan into annual work plan, and this is the stages. After having 5-year work plan, then we will come up with the annual work plan to pick some of the adopted activities and output from the 5-year work plan into our annual work plan, and then develop concept notes which we have to fill all the parameters, like it should be gender sensitive, it should be cross-cutting, it should meet with the regionality of regional dimension of the activity, and also alignment to different instruments, and align with the ASEAN sectoral bodies, as well as inclusive to the participation of the stakeholders. And then after having consensus on the draft concept notes, then we implement the activity following what we have agreed in the concept note in terms of content, as well as the methodology of how the activity will be done, and then we come up with the report. So that's how we move from 5-year work plan into annual work plan. The the activity from the from the individual, the result from the individual activities will be collected. Our 5-year work plan now has included the review process, as well as monitoring on to what extent activities meet with the expected output of the 5-year work plan. So that's how we do it as institution. Next. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Already. You've answered all my questions. No, but I as a okay, as somebody who an outsider of the of the ASEAN bureaucracy and how things work. This It is very exciting to listen to this, especially when you present it as an evolution from over the last 10 years. But I wonder, how does it work for people on the ground? How does this convert? I know you have regular meetings. I know you have people. Your membership changes every so often, and you meet very often. But who brings these activities to the ground? Do the members Are the members actively um, carrying this these issues and these activities in their individual countries? I mean, how? Can you tell me? You or Eric, or actually any of you can answer this because you've all been there.
So, so all of us can
You go
answer.
ahead.
Oh.
Go ahead, you.
So I think AICHR is regional organization.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on what kind of output that you actually wanted to come out. One of the target of AICHR is sectoral bodies, member states. So not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily on the ground, because the one that should reach out to the ground is actually the member states. They have
Mm-hmm.
the authority to reach to the ground. So and we know that some member states have different definition about certain issues. So that is why iChair provide a platform in which learning, exchange of information, discussion can be happen, and member state will be able to learn to each other and then make their own decision to change. So I give you the example, the example that I continue to mention. So, for instance, last year, AICHR organized Right to Development workshop of Right to Development in November 2019. We invited the planning agencies of all countries, and then the national agencies from Laos and Cambodia approached me, saying that, that's how human rights based approach to be done. So it's actually doable. I can do that. When I'm back to Vientiane, I will be able to gather some related agencies and institutions to talk about it. And it doesn't learning from the presentation of Indonesia and Thailand. He said, uh, actually, it is about mindset. It's not necessarily changing the whole planning that already done a couple years ago. So I think this is the role that iChair can do. One of them, iChair can do to provide this kind of exchange of views among stakeholders at the government and civil society, universities, to be able to exchange views. And some participants can also say, yes, this human rights based approach, but not necessarily having element of participatory, for instance. So that is why when government receive this, they will be able to correct. But the one who make decision on how to move forward is actually uh, the national government. The thing that can go into ground is actually some of the activities in relation with together with civil society, because it is about them. Last year, ICHR also organized Jakarta Human Rights Dialogue. We talk about who are working on human rights. Despite the fact, uh, so without calling human rights defenders yet, we identify who are the actors on human rights, what are challenges in pushing the idea of human rights, what the role of state and non-state actors, and how challenges can be addressed. So in many ways, we actually talk about human rights defenders without mentioning it yet on human defenders. And at the same time, we also try to, by having this kind of discussion, we try to contribute to the interpretation of Article 9, which talk about the participation of stakeholder of people participation on promotion and protection of human rights. So this is something that can go into ground in terms of human rights defenders, but at the same time, we also target the member states and then ASEAN sectoral bodies. Last point, the AICHR has three stakeholders, category of stakeholders. First is ASEAN member states.
Mm-hmm.
Second, ASEAN sectoral bodies. ASEAN sectoral bodies means they are working for regional project, and this is
Mm-hmm.
different interest with the ASEAN member
Yeah.
state. And then the third is stakeholders, include universities, civil society, youth, media,
Mhm.
private
Yeah.
sectors. These stakeholders are more complex and need to be elaborated further, and it need to be detailed in how AICHR deal with certain groups to be able to arrive at some possible not cooperation, because we don't have to cooperate, but how AICHR can serve uh, the need, the interest, and the rights of
But
stakeholders.
but you will agree that I mean that you talked about the three stakeholders, that the CSOs and the universities, the academe would would be in a good position to input into
Mm,
ICHR, to make
yeah,
it richer, make it
yeah,
more progressive. So it's not as if it's one way that
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, before is there anyone who wants to add to this discussion? Eric? Yeah.
Thank you, Pauline, and thank you, Yun, for the presentation. Just to add on to what Yun has said, I think what Pauline raised is a very excellent question, because at the end of the day, human rights in ASEAN must be able to affect the lives of the people of ASEAN. Truth be told, I mean, the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration is not as well known as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Mhm.
I think in that aspect, for example, AICHR has done tremendously well over the last 10 years. I think we have done more than more than 100 activities in order to promote the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, and now we are in the process of trying to clarify the norms. What does the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration means? And in this regard, I would like to bring to the attention of viewers that back in May 1st, 2020, AICHR issued a historic press statement on COVID-19, whereby we asserted the right of under Article 29 that guarantees every person has a right to enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health. So that's one. And we asserted an important issue that all persons at risk or infected by COVID-19, including women, children, the elderly, persons with disability, migrant workers, and vulnerable and marginalized groups, can also access essential healthcare services. And lastly, I also like to emphasize that because under COVID-19 has affected the entire world. Of course, ASEAN is no less impacted by COVID-19. A number of other rights are also affected, including right to work, education, privacy, movement, religion, expression, and peaceful assembly. But I think AICHR did well in emphasizing that this human rights can be restricted. However, it must be in the pursuit to a legitimate aim, and it must be subjected to the principle of necessity and proportionality. So I think that is an important statement, whereby we clarify under what circumstances such rights can be restricted
Mhm.
in the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration. The other point I'd like to add here is that again, it's well known that AICHR has an evolutionary approach, and that and for the longest time there's the issue about how do we address complaints. For example, if there's a complaint from a particular country that there's a grievous human rights violation, how does AICHR, as a regional human rights body, address this issue? Because obviously the basic principles of AICHR is very well known. It's a consultative body, it's an intergovernmental commission, and there's an issue about non-interference in internal affairs of fellow ASEAN states. But nonetheless, this was resolved this after intense discussion, whereby now complaints cannot be sent to the ASEAN Secretariat, and then this particular complaint cannot be forwarded to the country concerned. Yes, it is not as strong as other countries, but nonetheless, in compliance with evolutionary approach of
Mhm.
ASEAN and AICHR, it is a very good start. Thank you.
Oh, yes, we worked with ASEAN for 25 years. We know it has to be step by step, brick by brick. You cannot rush ASEAN into big decisions like yes, responding to human rights complaints by the countries and letting go of non-interference. Yes. Rafendi, does this excite you? What about this new 5-year plan? Is excites you?
Thank
If
you,
it does.
Pauline, for giving it. First, I'd like to congratulate working group for organizing this one. I think this is the mid-term of the current work plan, right? We are in 2020. We're supposed to finish in 2025, 24. Okay. Well, I'll make some points about this. It is interesting to hear what Yun has already presented, that you feel there has been a lot of the so-called step-by-step evolutionary process, building mechanisms, trust building is happening in the course of the years. It is now entering the third phase. So when you look back at the impact of the first 5 and 10 years, maybe it's good to look at the impact. Has AICHR make any impact? Impact uh, in accordance with what was the intention to create AICHRs since the beginning, right? So I'll give some examples. First is mainstreaming of human rights in ASEAN. You have noticed that in the last 10, 15 years, the, the language of human rights has been also lauded in different sectoral bodies. There has been a very more intensive cross pillar as well as cross sector within one pillar of ASEAN community on collaboration. So the nature of ITER as an overarching body across the three pillars of the community, the
Um,
approach, the
I,
approach
go ahead.
in terms of the program is very much, very much, very much, how do you call that, based on mandate without setting what are you going to achieve in the next 5 years. So that's a big thing where there was an
Wow.
feel comfortable to talk about strategic plan to have a work plan that will give an impact, that will have a benchmark that can always be evaluated and monitored. One thing I missed in the presentation of Union 5 years work plan, every year in the meeting of the AMM, that's the time that I chair presenting the report. But I didn't see any monitoring evaluation process
Mm.
by the end of the working years. March already, where you have to go to the ASEAN foreign minister.
Okay.
I think that's a question to you. If you ask me that I'm excited, yeah, I think it's very exciting.
Exciting.
We're working on cluster, one mandate doing this. You know? So that
You're breaking up, Rafendi.
is
You're breaking up. You're breaking up. I think you're.
Thanks.
Can we
Oh, I'm breathing.
move on for a while?
I'm so sorry.
Can you
Yeah. Can we,
repeat? Can you repeat the question?
the question?
Mm.
He was talking about monitoring and evaluation process that he did not see in the presentation at the end of 5 years.
Oh,
But he said, um,
Maybe I think, can you hear me? Maybe I think the question I think was asked before. I think when working group was discussing with AICHR, whether there was a self-assessment that was done by ASEC or AICHR before the development of this new 5-year
mhm.
work plan. I think that specifically can help frame the question. And if there was self-assessment, then what were the results of that self-assessment of the AICHR of its previous work plans that have inputted or influenced the development of this work plan? I think I join my colleagues by saying that this is an improved version of the previous work plans. It's very good. It links to the mandates. It has clearer work of other bodies. That it looks to be a better structure. But the question really is one, when the self-assessment or did it happen, what were the results of that? Number two, my personal question from feedback that I get, of course, being outside the AICHR, is how has AICHR dealt with the elephants in the room? You cannot say that as a very progressive human rights AICHR activists, and then there's another group that are ambivalent, and then there's another group that may not be so progressive. You cannot just say diplomacy, let's do this. The question is, internally as human rights diplomats, as progressive human rights diplomats, what has been the trick or what has been the strategies used internally within the AICHR to deal with the elephants in the room? Rakhine State in Myanmar, Papua in Indonesia, uh, extrajudicial killings in Philippines, treatment of migrant workers in Singapore and Malaysia, in Thailand, um, and many others. I think you know what the media, for example, even I think a lot of questions are being asked about what is AICHR's position on the current protests in Thailand. Has there been attempts within the AICHR in the human rights diplomatic community to try and move something that's a bit more progressive? So one, I think Rafendi's question, to paraphrase, really, is there a self-assessment of the previous work plans? And if there was self-assessment, what are the results? And if the results could be made public or at least summarized so that we can see what Forum Asia has been saying, for example, a decade in review. These are the problems with AICHR, but AICHR has never responded to that. So I think that's the first question. And the second question is, how has AICHR internally dealt with diplomatically these elephants in the room?
Who wants to take that on?
okay. First, the first question from Rafendi, I think Rafendi also mentioned about the interface meeting with foreign ministers in the Senate, whether there is a process, there is a response from foreign ministers into our reports, and then lead to what Edmund mentioned is rather quite different from what Rafendi mentioned earlier on the is there any assessment on the previous 5-year work plan and whether there is a result on this. So to answer Rafendi's question, with in this 5-year work plan, I think I mentioned in the focus area 6 that there is a review that we are going to do. How, we don't know yet because it is there in the plan. We need to discuss among ourselves how to do the review. This is the first time that review enter the 5-year work plan. Um, so the function of interface meeting to foreign ministers is to report, and then usually the foreign ministers will accept the report and then add more instruction. So it's very important. This part is instruction from the foreign ministers. That is how we define what does it mean by saying human rights strategies. Human rights strategies mentioned in the TOR. but how we actually define it. And foreign ministers actually provided a number of clue, like mainstreaming of human rights. So the reason why AICHR, I think since with the previous batch, already implement mainstreaming of human rights, despite the fact that the OR does not mention anything about um, mainstreaming of human rights, because that's instruction. And mandate of AICHR at paragraph 4.14 is to perform any task coming from foreign ministers. So that's how this additional task to AICHR can come from. And also coming up with the policy recommendation, coming up with the plan of action, and many other things. So is there any review from the foreign ministers? Usually there was a review, but as you can see, all everything already prepared, because we send the report even 1 month before and read by CPR, and then responded by foreign minister. So in terms of review, different layers of review is actually there. And then we, in this 5-year work plan, we have included the process of review, but we don't know, are we going to do the review for every year or every 5 year, of every 2 or 3 years? We don't know yet. We need to discuss about it. And is there any assessment of the previous 5-year work plan? That's exactly why we organize strategic planning. In strategic planning, of course, it's only 1 day, so we prepared everything. Myself, I prepared before I make suggestion on what to be included in the 5-year work plan. I make the assessment on first 5-year work plan and look at what implemented and what not implemented. And I also look at how this 5-year work plan translated into the annual work plan. Is there any connection? Is there any compliant? Can they change, or anything like that? So how, to what extent countries actually participated into the implementation of the 5-year work plan? And this assessment I sent to ASEAN Secretariat, because they will be the one who come up with the populating the 5-year work plan based on our inputs from different countries. And that is why I mentioned earlier the country visit, for instance. It was mentioned in the first 5-year work plan, not implemented. Mentioned in the second work plan, not implemented. And then, because it is not yet implemented, and it is very important, and it is uh, it represents the ideas from the previous representative, and I know how difficult it was for the previous representative to get the consensus of having this particular activity. So we maintain it. We try to maintain it, and then it appeared in the third 5-year work plan. So, and then some of the activity which uh, uh, worse to implement, and then we know that there are a number of follow-up from the workshop, then we maintain the issue, but change the type of activities according to the recommendation from the workshop. So again, um, the text that you've seen in the 5-year work plan 2021-2025 is actually a reflection from different inputs, from input receiving from civil society.
Yeah, but you, again, my question is, that's technique. That's technical. You know, you look at activities not done. The question really is assessment. When we do self-assessment, my question, maybe I didn't frame it correctly. What are the strengths of AICHR and what were the weaknesses of AICHR?
Okay.
And
Now
whether
you
actually
mention about that question. Before, you don't mention about that question, whether it is open or not open. The
I use the
assessment,
word self-assessment, right? Yeah.
yeah, the result of assessment was discussed in the strategic planning. That is why it is not open. And also because having the planning, usually people want to know about themselves. So in terms of strength and the weakness, uh, through the work plan, we have not discussed into detail, but that AICHR not comply, follow the process of having this structure of having a work plan, a fiber work plan, and then planning. That's something that come to the discussion. Another one is our in the last 10 years from the five-year work plan. It seems like activities of AICHR tend to be more on implementing activities, not necessarily aiming for creation of tangible output. Therefore, the five-year work plan look at more tangible outputs, framework, cooperate, and then what recommendation. So these words more measurable rather than from the previous two work plan and issues. uh, the more we mention about issues, the more clearer for us to imagine what happened in the future. So that this kind of ability of learning in AICHR from first, second, and the third five-year plan is something that I want to applaud for uh, for AICHR. Dealing with the elephant of the room in the room. In terms of number of issues, I think so far in the are you looking at the current AICHR or the previous AICHR? Because I don't have any authority to speak the
No, of
previous.
course, talking about your time, we know what we did our time.
Okay.
But so specifically on those issues, inside what actually goes on, because when we hear or we see from the outside, and I want to commend the AICHR for, as Eric mentioned, for the 10 of you issuing the COVID statement. That was excellent. There was 4 of you that issued the statement on the transboundary haze pollution issue. Now the question becomes, these issues are very important, yet seen as soft issues by CSOs. The real question is those that I've mentioned. What was the progress during this current AICHR batch on the issues that sort of follow up, because we raised the issues at the previous AICHR batch in retreats and in sideline meetings, EJK, Papua, of course, Rakhine, migrant workers, and then I think everybody is asking what is the position of AICHR on the Thai protests that are happening. So specifically those things during your time.
For the current issues right now on the protest in Thailand, we have not discussed that. But I know Thai representative released her personal statement, and Eric and I already talk about it too. So, but that's rather personal intervention rather than in institutional intervention. Uh, I'm not sure whether we have the opportunity to discuss that in the next AICHR meeting. But since 2019, I think we have put the Rohingya card in the official meeting. So we in Jakarta in 2019 in April we managed to discuss about refugees, includes the issue of Rohingya in the actual meeting. It is not on the side meeting, in the actual meeting with UNSCR. So it was again, we cannot be able to arrive at that point without the previous efforts from the previous representative. So because that's institutional memory, institutional activity, so we can raise the bar, we can lift up certain quality. Last year we also managed to talk to have a meeting with Cecilia Jimenez as special rapporteur. It was the first time for AICHR to invite. It is still informal meeting, but we invite her to come to our meeting, but still informal because we have a we have a discussion with her on her work during lunch meeting. Uh, 8 out of 10 representative come to the meeting. One representative had an appointment with doctor, so she couldn't come. But it was the first time that we had a discussion with special rapporteur, and also with the fact-finding mission, Pak Marzuki Darusman and the team. We had a meeting with him in the evening, so it's informal. I think three, four representative come to the dinner and having a talk with the fact-finding mission on Rakhine. In every single meeting of AICHR, we table the concern about Rakhine, about Rohingya. Um, but of course it has been quite difficult. So if it is not successful at the official meeting, we usually do it in the sideline of the meeting. And also we try to find ways through the workshop, because there is a certain there's a different feeling of having a official meeting and the workshop. The official meeting means that everything becoming official, written officially, documented officially. But in the workshop, it's not necessarily official, because no decision can be made. It is therefore we can discuss a number of sensitive issues in the format of workshops. So yeah, migrant workers continue to be sensitive issues, but the research on migrant workers now ongoing, and we hope to come up with the result by of April 2021. And other issues, no, we have not discussed that in the official meeting of AICHR.
So for now, it's just the migrant workers issue and COVID that you have been able to discuss as AICHR. The other issues like EJK in Manila and that kind of stuff, these are not yet possible. It's not yet
Rohingya,
possible to do this in
no,
in.
Rohingya, even, oh no, Rohingya is already to me, because it's already reached the official meeting of AICHR. We discussed it in the official. It is no
Ah,
longer in the sideline, but we
okay.
continue to follow the issue. And I think it become the center of attention of ASEAN right now, since last year. And there is no reason why we cannot talk about it further.
Mhm. I'm of
Pauline,
course
just
interested.
before, just a follow-up question actually, just to that before we move on, maybe the ASEAN has now a new special task force to have a more comprehensive needs assessment, a CNA, on the situation of the refugees in Bangladesh, in terms of supporting AHA centers move to accelerate Myanmar's government's intention to accelerate the repatriation. So how far have those discussions gone with AHA Center and AICHR to support or provide needs assessment and human rights expertise to the CNA Special Task Force team? I think that question is also a question that many people have asked.
I am not sure about the task force. I think what the Secretary General established is the body to support the implementation of the report of AHA Center. So it is not another a body that competing with the AHA Center. AHA Center is supposed to be doing the comprehensive need assessment, but that comprehensive need assessment only can be done when Rohingya refugees started to move. As of now, no one moving from Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, so the comprehensive cannot be done, because the idea of having a comprehensive assessment is to see whether or not the system of repatriation is actually working. But since no one use it, so they can start it. They cannot start this. But the one that established by the Secretary General of ASEAN was about the, I'm not sure about the body or working group or task force. I can't remember the name. But this particular body, I call it now body, is to implement two or three recommendation from the previous report from AHA Center, to mobilize resources, to to engage, to invite supports from external parties to support this in terms of logistic, providing computers, matters, and everything to on two sides of receiving and two sides of transiting. So that's the body that Secretary General was established.
Okay, Rafendi is back, and then
Yeah,
there's also been somebody
yeah,
who said he was keen to hear Pak Rafendi to finish in a better connection. So you have the floor, Rafendi.
yeah. Yeah, sorry, I was kicked out. It was a wrong internet connection. I have a follow-up question. I mean, not probably not follow-up, but related to the Rakhine and Rohingya in Bangladesh and task force. I think the first question should be: I understood there was an attempt of AICHR to collaborate with AHA Center to contribute something on how AICHR as a human rights organizations can support the work of AHA Center at the level of assessment or even at the level of providing some recommendation in relation to the human rights of the displaced people. So that's my question. The second one is actually to Eric. You mentioned about COVID-19 because there is also a task force of ASEAN COVID-19, and this task force on ASEAN COVID-19 is also even expanded to the ASEAN plus three, China, Japan, and Republic of Korea. My question is, looking at the work plan of current work plan, has there been any adjustment of priority looking at, how AICHR can contribute in the reviving process of ASEAN as a whole and member state to recover economically, socially from COVID? Has there been any changes or any discussion with the AICHR? Because you need to readjust some of the programs and resources and putting that as a priority. There's going to be a so-called new life after the COVID.
Okay, who wants to answer first? Eric.
Thank you, Pauline. Just like to come back to Edmund's question regarding the elephant in the room. Look, you guys were in ICHR before us, and I think basically the way of working and the dynamics have not changed. It really depends on who represents the respective countries and how they are selected, and the level of commitment, interest, involvement in human rights that they want to be. That is why for the past 10 years, there's been called for the terms of reference of AICHR to be reviewed so that AICHR gets the human rights body that we all deserve. And as you know, last year, the ASEAN foreign ministers have agreed, finally, for the AICHR terms of reference to be reviewed. And he has tasked the SOM, the senior officials meeting, to set up a panel of experts to look into the review of the AICHR terms of reference. I think that is the only way, because even for you, Edmund, during your time, for your statement on the Rakhine, only Indonesia and Malaysia signed on to the statement. And it is extremely difficult to convince other members to take on certain positions in human rights, whether it's in Thailand or Malaysia or elsewhere. So I would urge CSOs and colleagues and other stakeholders, in order for us to really talk about the issues the way Edmund has phrased it, right? So there's an issue in Papua, there's an issue in Thailand, there's an issue in Malaysia and elsewhere. How can we intervene? How can we protect the ASEAN people from harm? How can we give them access to justice and so forth? How can we accurately monitor, evaluate, go to the ground, visit, etc., like other human rights bodies do? The only way, realistically, is the AICHR terms of reference review so that it becomes more robust, whereby these powers are actually spell out clearly. Because as far as creative interpretation is concerned, that has only worked thus far. There's only so much that you can creatively interpret, and as all it takes is one objection from a member state, then any initiative would collapse. So I wait with bated breath for the day that the AICHR terms of reference is reviewed positively, and that we are able to perform the task that has been entrusted to us to the full realization that the people of ASEAN should aspire to. Thank you.
Yeah, well, let's mention the TOR. That's the other elephant in the room. What are the chances of a of the of well, there's already been a move to review it, right? But what are the chances of a radical review of the TOR coming out in ASEAN at this time? Or would this be the time? I mean, would it, if we do it now, will it pass? Or should we just wait for a better time to review the terms of reference of AICHR? Who would like
Please
to
don't
respond?
please don't confuse reviewing and amending. Reviewing can also end up with no changes, because that's exactly what the fear of many member states now, that by reviewing there is an implication of changing. The change can be positive, can be negative.
So what
So
term should we use?
no, the review is okay, but we need to maintain our expectation, because review is actually assessing whether
Mm-hmm.
these TORs can
Whether it
be
works.
can continue to be like
Mm-hmm.
this or can be changed. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the review. Um, um, Number of things. Well, from my personal opinion, the paragraph 4.2, for instance, on the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, because the word is to develop, so that can be changed to implement or to promote the implementation. So that possible change, if the review thinks that some of the words need to be adjusted to fit with the context.
Mm-hmm.
So that's possibility. If you think, what is the chance, uh, that exactly what the review team will be looking at, or should be looking at, because it's very obvious. The rest still 50-50. But first, countries need to send names to panel of experts. It's only now Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, and Cambodia. How about 6 countries? Without 6 countries coming into the panel of experts, this panel of experts cannot work, cannot even launch their
Mm-hmm.
own type of preference to work, to start the review. Because when the panel of experts complete the members, they have to meet and then decide among themselves what to do, how to do the review, how to do we want to meet every month, every whatever, uh, what kind of scope, and then how the review happen. Do we need to interview AICHR? Do we need to review civil society? So nothing happened before panel of experts completes the 10 members of,
So
of, of the panel.
yeah, yeah. So strategically, would this be the right time to force a
Well,
review of the
the right
TOR?
the right time supposed to be in 2014, because it is not about right or not. It's about compliant with the TOR itself. The TOR should be reviewed every 5 years. 2014 is the 5 year. So I think it would be good to comply with what members that already agreed. Whether or not it come up with the decision of changing or not changing, that's a different matter. But first, comply with what already agreed. Rafendi has a question. If I may, can I answer
Go ahead.
Rafendi's question earlier?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So Rafendi's asked about the cooperation between Center and AICHR. There was no discussion in AICHR and in Center how to work together. I suggested to have a cooperation, and then quoted by media. And this is something that we internally also discuss in Indonesia, the possibility of cooperation. In terms of how five-year work plan respond to the recovery, I think the my PowerPoint presentation also mentioned that we already submitted the inputs from our five-year work plan, looking at the immediate problem of the pandemic, dealing with education. So how to ensure inclusive education for children and students, and then public health, technology, standard for business, especially during how what we have learned during the pandemic, and how this learning from the pandemic inspire us to come up with a framework during recovery, and more importantly, how we can come up with a framework when we face the pandemic again in the future. We already have this kind of tools, and we also included in our submission to the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework on the suggestion to come up with the initiative to assess how human rights had been performed for vulnerable groups, for women, children, youth, migrant workers, and many other vulnerable groups that have already identified. We also include their mixed migration in relation to pandemic. What we have seen in the region, a lot of refugees, because fear of pandemic, fear of COVID-19, they run away from the camp and rejected in different part of the countries. How this can be addressed from human rights perspective. So I take a note of your concerns and how, because the pandemic will be taking a longer time, and the five-year work plan, our five-year work plan was designed with the context of non-pandemic situation. So it means we need to adjust some of the activities into more recovery and post-recovery, or whatever, until we can say COVID-19 is no longer here. But this time will be long, and with in this time, a five-year work plan need to be implemented. AICHR already agreed to organize number of its activities online in response to the limitation of movement that imposed right now. So yes, we we have to adjust our work.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to acknowledge a question here from Professor Virginia Dandan.
Oh yes.
You
Oh,
partly answered it.
hello,
What are the
Prof.
plans of AICHR to address specifically the adverse human impacts of COVID-19 on the fulfillment of economic, social, and cultural rights in the
Mm,
ASEAN region? You've answered it partially. Would you like
yes.
to add for the
Hello, Prof. Virginia Dandan. I plan to email you. So number of because now with the pandemic, the global attention to human rights is shifted from civil political rights to more economic, social, cultural rights, especially right to health. And so we need to capitalize this kind of attention to dig more and more discussion about this. And in our five-year work plan, we have ample of economic, social, cultural rights. We continue to have a discussion on right to development, as well as a right to health. I think it's mentioned also right to work, and one country also suggested having a thematic study on right to work, um, um, and also having technology aspect into the dimension of human rights. I think our 5-year work plan, despite it was aimed to uh, portray or aim to be implemented in non-pandemic situation, it captured a number of the current discussion we have in the shifting of civil political rights to economic social cultural rights. Number of economic social cultural rights there, but it doesn't mean that we will forget civil political rights. We continue to have activities in relation to civil political rights because it is equally important with other rights. But the amount of attention now in the 5-year work plan in terms of civil political, in terms of economic, social, cultural right is more balanced compared with. I cannot make a comparison. I think how small is a balance.
That's okay. It's evolving. It's evolving.
No,
That's
because I want, because this is a process.
yes, it is. It's evolutionary. Yes.
I appreciate the process. I
Mhm.
know how difficult it was to achieve consensus in from time to time. So
Mhm.
whatever has achieved by the previous work plan, that's the best consensus we have, and our
Definitely.
task is to continue. So
Mhm.
I don't want to make a comparison. I think it's more evolution process.
Okay.
In
Um.
terms in terms of CSO relationships and accreditation, um, what are the meat to the bones that have been given to improve the guidelines and working with CSOs? In 2016, there were 6 accredited CSOs. By the end of 2018, there were 30 accredited CSOs. And there are also questions from CSOs as to whether it is worth being accredited with the AICHR, considering how the process takes a long time. So what has changed from 2018 onwards in terms of CSO involvement, relationship, and the numbers look to have been stagnant for the past 2 years at 30. So my question that also comes from groups around us is why is this so, and is there been a change? But with all of you being very close to CSOs, surely the environment for relationships and engagement with CSOs within the AICHR should have improved. And how that tapping of knowledge into the CSOs can help AICHRs and strengthen AICHRs work. And the work plan, actually, looking at the work plan, it doesn't seem to be a special position for CSOs and the relationship.
Well, Edmund, you can ask the question without speaking on behalf. You continue to mention this is a question from the group. This is also can be your question.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course. But then I think when you say that, oh, Edmund is your question, and of course, I'm saying yes. I represent people who ask those questions, and may be afraid to ask the question to Eric or you because you all are so high up, right? I'm just trying to be a bit more
Where you
grounded.
used to be, Edmund.
oh, exaggerated,
I'm supposed to
exaggerated.
make a joke actually because they say that.
Yeah. Okay. Who's going to answer
Well,
this?
I think 5-year work plan has included CSO symposium. That's the idea from the previous batch. Yeah. So we try to institutionalize it into 5-year work plan. Rotso continue to be there. Uh, uh, I think um, in terms of civil society engagement, this 5-year work plan aim to rather regularize. So we don't have to defend anymore. It is already there, accepted. So we can, because when the idea is already accepted, then we can discuss the content, the ideas inside inside
Mhm.
the common activity. So that's what we also taken from the previous one. In terms of guideline, well, civil society has engagement is quite it's very is a big chunk of activities, as you can see in the 5-year work plan now. Atmun, you also can identify if you read the what is we agreed to have the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration Day as a celebration, as engagement to general public. I know this is the idea from Edmund a couple years ago, but now it's already there. So we hope that we can capitalize this kind of initiative to bring more public to engage and to know about the role of AICHR, and especially the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration. In terms of guideline, there is no discussion to revise a guideline of civil society affiliation. When we started our first year, we received two two application, and then no consensus of to to
On this
accept.
too.
And then now we have one from Cambodia. Eric is the member of NGO screening.
But it cannot be. It's the same. It's the same screening panel, right? Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore.
I'm no longer.
So then you're saying Singapore is the one that is blocking the applications, is it? Right? Unless you say the screening panel has changed.
Yeah, I'm no longer. Indonesia is no longer the member of screening panel. Eric,
Oh, what? You have been kicked out? What happened?
kicked out? No, I don't nominate myself.
Eric, were you
Indonesia was
raising your
always on
hand?
the screening panel.
I think
Oh,
Eric.
this explains it, right? Because we're all asking why is it stuck at 30? Because the thing has opened up, and you know why is it still stuck at 30? So who's on the screening panel now?
Eric,
No, I think the screening panel is not the issue here. It's just I think that well, first of all, the numbers of application has gone down. I think the initial euphoria has died down, and I think Edmund is right to ask this question: what are the benefits of to have this accredited status? And I think we are trying to address that in the FiveYear work plan. There's a higher number of activities working together with CSOs. But I think we also should not forget that as an accredited status CSO, I think they get first preference in all the activities that we do. And I think for last year, especially the events organized in Thailand and Indonesia, for example, we have seen many new faces that are not normally seen in AICHR events. So I think that's brought a lot of different views, and some views are frankly quite hard hitting, and I think needed to be heard in AICHR meetings. So certainly there are a lot of some benefits for CSOs to be accredited. But I think I also acknowledge Edmund's point in that there must be more formal engagement between CSOs and AICHR, and how CSOs should not be seen in an adversarial manner, that they should be seen as something who can contribute a lot to human rights in terms of expertise, in terms of value added to the work of AICHR. And I think that's something that certainly Yuyun and myself would support. But again, it takes a lot of effort to get consensus. I think as far as CSO is concerned, Edmund, if you could, since you have a lot of connection with CSOs, other than engaging with Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, I think a lot of efforts must be made to other countries. I know it's much more difficult, but again, we only can work if all 10 agree. And basically, there must be a compromise and meeting point whereby all 10 countries can work together in this regard.
I have a follow-up question on that.
yeah,
Go ahead, Fendi.
I understood. No, I have a question on the substance. On the big question whether it is a meaningful engagement or not. That's my question. What is your assessment? Because now, compared to my time, there was no civil society accredited because we were in the process. But now there are so many civil society accredited already, and I understand there is a difficulty to set up the agenda or dialogue. Even, yeah, please tell me what can you do? What, yeah, how what have you done to try to make a meaningful dialogue rather than just a formality? We're invited. Oh yeah, I see new faces. Welcome. This is how we do it. And then what? Please.
Well, because
I
from
would like to hear from Eric. Please.
yes.
Yes, Rafini only hear from me because he knows what Yuyun is going to say. Look, I mean, I take the point that it is not easy to organize it because at the end of the day, look, our main activities in AICHR is, we are limited. We have 4 meetings per year. To those who are not familiar, AICHR does not have a dedicated secretariat, so a lot of plannings are done during these meetings, these 4 meetings per year. And normally we do a lot of workshops, and these workshops are very wide ranging, from right to education to right of the child to rights of women, and so they're very wide ranging, and sometimes we do not see the more programmatic approach. That is the reality. And a lot of times in all of these programs, workshops, etc., CSOs come. Some of them get to speak, some of them participate, and everybody speak the good, speak and fight the good fight, and then this becomes mere recommendations which are not adopted, which is something hopefully in this FiveYear work plan we hope to address. Again, over the last 10 years, there have been 3 or 4 meetings or dialogues solely between AICHR and CSOs. It should be done hopefully yearly, but I think this was suggested, but I think it wasn't agreed upon by some other colleagues. But we certainly hope to do one soon, but unfortunately because of COVID-19, we are not able to meet face to face. But somehow or other we must get beyond this COVID-19, but somehow or other we must make use of the remaining time that we have as AICHR representative. I don't have straight answers to Rafendi in terms of how we can push this better, because clearly Malaysia, Indonesia, for example, and Thailand, we do not have issues in terms of engaging more with CSOs, because we certainly value the participation of CSOs from various backgrounds. But sometimes because of logistical issues, because of funding issues, because of various other issues that are that is beyond our control, such formal dialogues are not able to be done. But certainly the niyat is there, our intention is there, but just sometimes last year it was just not possible.
Something just came to me. With all of these activities that AICHR is planning or has done, you have workshops, and then you have all these dialogues with we try to have dialogues with CSOs, and you do go out, you have outreach to the communities, and then you also have outreach to the countries to make sure that they implement the human rights treaty obligations and stuff. Wouldn't a secretariat at this time, isn't it about time you had a secretariat that you insist on ASEAN creating a dedicated secretariat to handle all of these things for continuity, yeah. Is that even in the discussion? Is that even on the table in AICHR?
I think that discussion stopped some time but it is no longer come into our discussion. If because I read a number of summary records, sometime at some point the discussion has stopped, and perhaps during the review of the TOR, this kind of idea can come again on the need of full-fledged dedicated secretariat.
Do you think AICHR could become more dynamic if it had its own secretariat? Because you have members who come for meetings, but do they have? I mean, what kind of support system does AICHR have?
Sorry. Just quickly on that. That is why it's so important for the terms of reference review to be reviewed positively, and I think that is one of the key issues that should be advocated upon by CSOs and other stakeholders. That AICHR, in order for AICHR to be much more effective, to be much more relevant to the people on the ground, is that more resources must be provided to AICHR, and that must involve a dedicated secretary.
Okay. There's a question here from Jessie Chia. How does AICHR make use of its given unique position to raise the awareness and understanding of human rights issues amongst the government ministers, politicians of ASEAN in the next few years? Among the ministers, I mean, do you have that kind of influence?
Um, so that's actually how AICHR should perform. Not sure whether at the moment we reached that point, but I remember during Rafendi's time, he organized this ASEAN Community Council meeting on the implementation of ASEAN Human Rights Declaration. So so now and then Rafendi has tabled another activity for that, and now in my time I will continue that kind of activity, because when I read the summary record, there was so the summary record actually reflected the discussion among ASEAN sectoral bodies in terms of ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, despite the fact ASEAN Human Rights Declaration was only launched in 2012. I think that discussion was in 2014 or something, or 2015. So the discussion, I found the discussion is very rich and new for me, because like AMAF, the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Agriculture and Forestry, talk about right to food, how less attention of many general public and also ASEAN to see food as rights. So I'm actually quite happy to read that kind of comments from the AMAF. And other sectoral bodies also mention about how and how that interpretation lead them to implement what they think as human rights of their sector. So I really appreciated reading this summary record and see the point of having this kind of ASEAN community council again. So last year, I've tabled one concept note already approved, getting consensus. We're supposed to organize one in this year, but because of COVID, still we are going to organize it, but online. So we hope either this year or next year, January or February, we will be able to host that kind of dialogue again with ASEAN sectoral bodies to understand how they perceive the ASEAN human rights as mentioned in ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, and how their interpretation guide them in their activities. I think I agree with what Rafendi earlier mentioned. More and more sectoral bodies in ASEAN actually mention about ASEAN Human Rights Declaration and mention about rights approach. I would like to draw your attention, for instance, on the joint statement of the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Social Welfare and Development on COVID-19 mitigation for vulnerable groups. It mentioned very, very clear about dignity, rights, and rights. So this right language not only belong to AICHR, but only already owned by sectoral bodies. And and it's actually ways to engage more in sectoral bodies to discuss further on uh, uh, human rights can be included in their work.
I want to ask about.
Yes, yes, we have that thing in our plan.
Can I
Yes,
ask
and
one question? It's very good that the work plan has consultations on human rights grievances regarding mechanisms to counter radicalization and violent extremism. There is also line agencies, including the AICHR, that appears in the culture of the Declaration on a Culture of Peace and Prevention. So if AICHR is looking into this, what when you say you have a consultation and that's a normal type of discussion and R2P will come up, hate speech will come up. Of course, there are only one or two countries in ASEAN that has a focal point for R2P, like Cambodia. The question is, would you not consider that it is time for AICHR, because of its links in the respective countries, and a lot of them are from government, that you can start looking at more of an ethnographic or anthropological type of study of vulnerable groups in forms of thematic studies to look and identify early warning systems and signs that may contribute to the violent extremism that we see in the Rakhine or in South Thailand, for example. Because I think AICHR is in a very unique position to vernacularize human rights. There is a position there in the work plan to localize the general comments and the general recommendations. Maybe this is a new approach that you can start looking at, not just in terms of workshops and consultations, but the thematic studies that really look at communities at risk and then come up with recommendations. The reason why I say that, and this is my second question, is that after 2018, what happened in AICHR is that we adopted a new modality for thematic studies. And if you look at, that was in 2018, if you look at the new modality to adopt thematic studies, because last time the thematic studies was not in AICHR's name. So the recommendations there were recommendations, so to speak, to the AICHR. And there was a lot of sanitization. Because AICHR said, no, don't recommend to us. Because you recommend to us, we will look embarrassed if you don't accept the recommendations. Now in 2018, there was a shift, but it's not stated specifically. If you look at the new modality to adopt thematic studies, AICHR has just released the legal aid thematic study. It's very good. I started during our time. The recommendations there are actually AICHR's recommendations. So for someone to say that AICHR has not taken a joint position on recommending and improving human rights, that's not right. My question is, what has AICHR, or what is the plan where these joint recommendations as part of those thematic studies can now be used as AICHR's joint position to advance the protection and promotion for human rights? So one on the way that AICHR does its work, maybe looking more of an anthropological, ethnographic type of study of vulnerable populations that may be at real risk, and that becomes an early warning system for the R2P. And secondly, the question about how are we going to move forward with the recommendations that have been adopted by the AICHR in the thematic studies. For example, the latest one on legal aid.
In terms of how AICHR follow up on the recommendation, the FiveYear work plan has included one activity in relation to reviewing recommendation and take position on the recommendation. So it is institutionalized in the FiveYear work plan on how we can do that. In terms of ethnographic approach to the research, I think that would be the decision of each representative, whether they want to use this kind of method in doing the research. I'm worried that this ethnographic approach rather strengthen this cultural relativism. Well, I'm not sure. My personal opinion, I don't think that kind of method fit with our now. Maybe fit with National Human Rights Commission, But when it comes to ASEAN, you have to be very careful on the debate on Asian values. We are trying not to touch on that area because that's exactly the weapon to say no. So we are. I'm pro to anthropologic. I like reading anthropological perspective on human rights. But when it comes to ASEAN, we have old trauma in 1993 on Asian values. So better not to enter that area. Better to
But
have.
then we are not dealing with the root cause, because if we don't look at it properly and we try and ignore it or sweep it under the carpet, that is why different countries will say, no, no, my society is like that. But then the question becomes, is it
Yeah,
really that your society is like that? And that's
we
why you have
can
different
find.
standards in ASEAN. So that's why that's the proposal that I just wanted views on, because it's new and we're studying that. And you can, of course, these are personal views. This is my personal question. Of course, you want to, but the position is we cannot run away from this ASEAN values argument. It's just that we need to meet it head on with evidence-based research to say that, yeah, this community may be different in this certain way, but they are still human beings that have human rights. Maybe that's a new approach. I don't
We
know.
can find out on what root of the causes without using the approach of ethnographic of
Yeah, but
as an
we still haven't dealt with that issue, right? That's why I'm saying AICHR is
no,
in a good
no. I think
position.
your question is on ethnographic or the importance of having root causes.
No, so I'm saying that you need to go deeper. We do the workshops,
But not
consultation. It's
necessarily
all
having
just
the
touch and
ethnographic
go on
approach.
top. It's touch and go on
Yeah,
top.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I only realized
Yeah,
this
I
after,
think
right?
I think that's what research of AICHR have done. If I read some of them, I haven't read some of them. There's a number of research already, but we can always find out the root causes. Since you bring up this issue from the entry point of the counter-violent extremism, AICHR has agreed of number of activities in relation to counter-violent extremism, uh, addressing the victim perspective, grievance mechanism, human rights-based approach, creating conducive situation for migrant workers for not being radicalized. So we have agreed of activities in relation to violent extremism. In terms of thematic study, I think number of member state agreed to come up with number of studies. Baseline is another way of looking at the root causes of countries on the issues. So by saying that using the approach of ethnographic to run away from ASEAN values, there is no connection of it. So it is that because ethnographic is very subjective. You even how come you can come up with this regional study only looking at one community, one individual situation, because it's ethnographic. You have to be in the community. So I think there are ways, so many methodologies to be able for the region to understand the root causes, and it has been conducted by numerous organizations. And for my experience so far, the debate on Asian values has less, but it doesn't mean that I want to go there. That's my personal opinion. I don't want to go there because it will not come up with something that benefit for us. There is no commitment on human rights coming out from the discussion on Asian values, and the idea of Asian values is very vague. Asian values belong to these two statements only, and even the other Asian countries did not necessarily accept that kind of values. So I do not want to calibrate. I don't want to enrich how Asian values has been defined and discussed. Stop there on the definition of Asian values in 1993 and there. So I do not want to enrich that. I don't want to contribute to that kind of discussion.
Okay, I have a question. So you have all of these studies that you're making and all of these workshops that have results. Okay, maybe the results are not always something that the leaders of ASEAN would accept. But do you have a way of publishing these results to be part of the dialogue in ASEAN, so that they have a broader audience, and then maybe the leadership will be able to understand more if it is articulated by the public. Is there a plan, or have you done this, that you publish the results of your studies and your workshops?
Some of the research published in the website. Some of the workshops report also published in the website. It's only three.
So they
Uh,
become part. It should be part of
Minimum, very
of
minimum.
the of the dialogue in the region. So it enriches the dialogue,
In
whether the senior officials agree with the results or not.
in the 5-year work plan, I think in focus area on raising awareness, there is
Mhm.
one activity there on sharing information about ASEAN, about AICHR studies and finding with the ASEAN sectoral bodies. So I think what you asked for is already there. Now the
Mhm.
implementation is matter.
To be popularized, hopefully. Wait, we have
Yeah.
two questions from RP.
Yes.
Um, can you read it? In preparing for this current work plan, has there been any information considered by AICHR to determine how AMS have integrated and implemented the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration?
Any information considered by AICHR to determine how. I think that's what I mentioned earlier with ASEAN Community Council dialogue on the implementation of ASEAN Human Rights Declaration.
Mhm.
Uh, so that kind of initiative can continue to work with sectoral bodies. I hope for them to get some of the ideas from Human Rights Declaration, and also because the blueprint, now we are in the midterm review of the blueprint, and the new blueprint will be drafted perhaps in 2024. So this is a time for us actually to feed in into the discussion of sectoral bodies on how they can extract ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, and especially the tools to on the ASEAN human rights based approach, because in ASEAN human rights based approach you have some tools to help governments or institution to design the program, the plan, the system, the implementation based on human rights international standard, the values and principle of human rights standard. So, so we have the item of activity already, and we hope to be able to implement before 2024. So when the sectoral bodies started to draft the new blueprint for 2025, they have the tools that they need in terms of integrating human rights as mentioned in ASEAN Human Rights Declaration.
Okay, another question. Okay, this one is refers to you, Rafendi. Another question by RP. I take note that Pak Rafendi tried to have the AHRD integrated through the ASEAN Coordinating Council in the past. How can AICHR insist that the AHRD be implemented by MS? Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, I have 2 points because I understand we are closing at 3 o'clock.
Not 4. Oh, yeah, at 3 o'clock your time, 4 o'clock hours. Nine
So we
minutes.
have about 7 minutes to go.
Yeah.
One issue that I like to say are two issues. One is on the common position. Yeah. In one of the cluster, we are continuing to have this rule which never been implemented. That AICHR have a recommendation to the foreign ministers to each, or if not each, at least the position at the Human Rights Council. Because at the Human Rights Council, ASEAN has been talking in several times during intervention. So there is actually more opportunity for AICHR to provide some inputs. If they are going to use it or not, that's another question. But if you organize it and you prepare it, I think that would be a good idea. Then you are implementing the role of AICHR as the one who's proposing a position on different issues that ASEAN dealing on many issues in the US Council. Number two, I regret that there is a stop on the development on the institutional development of AICHR, which is about standing agenda on dedicated secretariat. How could how could it be? I just realized now that it's not there anymore. It was always be a standing agenda. When you hear a report from the ASEAN Secretariat, you also will talk about the role of ASEAN Secretariat in supporting the work of AICHR, which include a dedicated secretariat. So I would like to urge that you guys who are now there in the commission to really revive this issue again. Number three, with regard to the review, with regard to the review, the constraint now that the panel of experts cannot work because it was never completed, and it is very clear there is no political will to do that from some member states who are not sending the panel of experts. So what we need to do, the AICHR, before the changing or even in the ASEAN Minister meeting retreat in January 2021, make sure that there should be an instruction from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, AMM, that the panel of experts will need to start to work with the rules, whether or not they already state it or not, they will have to be represented by the member state. The rules that the meeting will have to be conducted and the 10 will have to be there. If the 10 is not to be there, they will need to send an alternate, just like the mechanisms that AICHR has already got. So I think that's the way to do further. And then, of course, the chance on the review, we were looking forward to the chairpersonship of Indonesia again. When Indonesia is going to be the chair, I think building up to that process is something that can be thinking seriously. Thank you. Back to
Two.
Thank you.
This is the
Wait,
question for you. That's RP question for you. Answer.
No, you answer
That's
that.
no. That's for Pak Rafendi.
wait. We're actually in the last 5 minutes. Maybe this is the time to wrap up. Those of us who have last words to say, maybe we should start with. I think Rafendi had a very strong last words. Unless you have more to say, yes. Edmund.
Thank you, all of you for this. 70 over activities and action lines in the new work plan over 5 years is very ambitious. It's very good that a lot of new things have come in. It's very good that you have been able to achieve consensus on a lot of these action lines. Now, the next question becomes to what impact and implementation it will have on the ground and with partners. I think the working group for Malaysia, speaking just for ourselves and I'm sure for the regional as well, there is a note there where working group is also mentioned to work together on how we can mainstream some of these UN and OHCHR standards in ASEAN. I'm sure when you have a bit more concrete plans and working group also has their own plans, has our own plans. I'm sure we can try and work together in ways that we can encourage more participation and activity among ASEAN. That's all I have. Thank you, Pauline. And thank you to all of you.
Eric.
Yes, thank you. Sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about it. Um, look, I'm as Edmund and of course ably presented by Yuyun. This 5-year work plan is comprehensive and it's super ambitious. And of course, if we can complete the majority of them, I think it would be a great achievement, especially in the uncertain time of COVID-19. But in my short span of time in AICHR and the understanding of how AICHR works and the different expectations that the people on the ground or CSOs have of AICHR, I would certainly appeal for us, especially in the next coming years, other than just, of course, implementing the day-to-day work of AICHR and the 5 work plan, is to look at the TOR review. Because for me, that is actually key in order for us to really move beyond the evolutionary approach, but something a bit more a bit more like X-Men. It's like a mutant, like a sudden jump where we can become a human rights commission that all of us can rely, depend upon if, let's say, there's something serious human rights abuse that happen. That would be a very tough fight over the next few years. But I hope there will be a positive momentum. I can say that in the recent interface with the ASEAN foreign ministers, several foreign ministers spoke positively about the AICHR TOR review, and I hope more countries would support this positively, and hopefully we can truly get the TOR that AICHR
Eric,
deserves.
1 minute,
Thank you.
Yuyun.
1 minute.
1 minute, just 1 minute. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this event. This is the opportunity for us to share the 5-year work plan. Thank you very much for the questions, and myself remain open, approachable. If there is any question more or interest to work together, despite the limitation we have during COVID, because we believe that it is not human right is not only the responsibility of one country or governments, but also everyone. We contribute to this. This 5-year work plan, I think, representing the ideas of many people. It's not only this batch. It is not only our batch, because ideas coming from the previous batch, representatives from civil society, from scholars, from the discussion we had, from workshop we organized, from critics that we received. So this 5-year work plan belong to a lot of people, belong to you. And it is our responsibility to implement. And I would like to thank very much for those who really spend time, energy, and thoughts to help us in AICHR to come up with this 5-year work plan and letter for the implementation.
Okay, now I have the last word. As an outsider in this discussion, because I've just been really an observer all this time. Yes, I've seen the way the 5-year plans have developed, and the one you've developed is really ambitious and very and but I would like to see AICHR be more aggressive in promoting this, in promoting its mandate. I want to see it as an influencer and the carrier of human rights in the higher echelons of government, so that every plan has the stamp of AICHR, the stamp of human rights from AICHR. A brand. If you could, it's very important that AICHR develops its own brand, so that it's not just following. We can't do that because that's not discussed. That is not part of the discussion. Um, it would be a relief to see an AICHR that is leading the human rights. Leading in human rights in this region, which it needs very badly. Now, I'd like to thank all of you. You've been a wonderful panel. Yuyan, Eric, Edmund, Rafendi, What a dream panel you are. Thank you so much. I didn't have to do too much.
A picture.
Picture, who's gonna take
We
it?
are going into an emergency now. Malaysia
Who's-
has just cabinet. I think government has just decided to put us in an emergency.
Really?
So, when-
State of emergency? Political?
no. I think it's a COVID emergency.
COVID. Okay.
So all of us
Well,
will be stuck at home. But I
Still
just
not-
checked the news.
still not
Just
bad.
came.
Ayo,
Yeah.
take
Never
picture.
mind. We all be
I
stuck
don't know.
at
How do
home
we take a
together.
picture? I don't know this program.
Who's taking the picture?
Uh, let me try my
You know,
phone.
you always have to take picture, right?